Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we'll be talking about Jonathan Kuminga. The come bucket seems to be on the move. According to ESPN's Shams Charania, the Warriors will discuss trades for forward Jonathan Kuminga when he is eligible to be moved January 15, 2026. After discussions with the Phoenix Suns and Sacramento Kings in the summer failed to progress, we recently heard that the Indiana Pacers and the New Orleans Pelicans may have had discussions with the Warriors to acquire him. And Golden State wants to find upgrades on its roster. Kuminga's $22.5 million salary could be used in a bigger trade scenario, writes Shams Charania. And we know that he's missed the last few games due to knee tendonitis, as I can speak, and has had a fluctuating role with the team, getting some DMPs, coaches' decisions recently. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and where do you think Kuminga's going to go and why? As of right now, it does seem a little weird, but as the NBA's unofficial trade season opens up December 15th and then gets even more hot and steamy on January 15th, this report from ESPN details the evolving situation surrounding Golden State Warriors forward Jonathan Kuminga. For league personnel, coaches, scouts, and front office executives, the dynamics at play represent a classic case of divergent team timelines, asset valuation, and untapped potential, or reclamation project for untapped potential. Now, Kuminga is individually eligible to be moved on January 15, marks the date when a vast majority of players who sign new contracts in the offseason become trade eligible. This dramatically expands the pool of return targets for the Warriors, simplifying the arithmetic of constructing a viable deal and providing the necessary roster flexibility to execute a win-now move. Operating under the urgency of Stephen Curry's championship window, the Warriors front office is motivated by a clear triad of factors: timeline, system fit, and salary cap gymnastics. The two-timeline experiment designed to contend while developing high lottery talent has effectively ended. Kuminga's development requires on-ball reps and a tolerance for mistakes that a title-contending roster cannot afford. The Warriors see a deal as a pathway to convert his potential into immediate veteran contribution. A player who provides reliable spacing, can play the wing, defensive versatility, some size, and secondary playmaking without a learning curve. Steve Kerr's recent DMP coach's decision of the come bucket was a glaring signal to the league. Kerr's motion offense is predicated on half-second decision-making, fluid ball movement, and high basketball IQ. Scouts note that Kuminga, while an elite athlete, often operates as a ball stopper, disrupting offensive flow as he surveys the floor. Furthermore, his inconsistent jumper creates problematic spacing when paired with non-shooting bigs, directly impacting Curry's operating space. Defensively, his athletic tools are undeniable, but he lacks the consistent off-ball rotation, awareness, weak-side rim protection, and reliability that Kerr's system demands. Kuminga represents Golden State's most viable mid-tier salary matching instrument for a larger deal. Perhaps more critically, he becomes extension eligible, or I guess not extension eligible, I apologize for my misphrasing. He becomes an unrestricted free agent, or they could pick up the team option, as his second year of his deal is a team option and is more than likely going to be declined by whichever team. And if they want to bring him back, they would re-sign him on a newly negotiated deal. And if the Warriors' evaluation suggests he's not a future all-star, and committing to pay him the salary that the option would be, or even just bring him back, would just be prohibitive under the punitive second apron luxury tax, so they're incentivized to move on from him or declining that team option. Trading him now allows them to extract value before he reaches unrestricted free agency, and a major financial decision must be made, as they either keep him or they try to give him a deal that they won't get outbid on and they can't match anything anymore. So for acquiring teams, Kuminga represents a high upside bet on the second draft theory, the belief that a change of scenery and role will unlock to unlock a top tier talent, which, like, I agree. I mean, it makes sense. And for Kuminga, at 6'8" with the explosive vertical pop and strength, Kuminga's physical profile is untouchable. Rebuilding or retooling franchises can offer him 30 plus minutes and 15 plus shots per game that he would need to develop. A runway Golden State cannot provide. Scouts and GMs will point to reclamation successes like Lowry Markkanen as template, believing Kuminga's struggles are more a product of context than of ceiling. By acquiring Kuminga now, a team gets a rental piece that they'll be able to test drive for half a season to evaluate his fit and growth before either picking up his option or re-signing him and committing long-term capital. His recent benchings, combined with a history of knee tendonitis, have likely lowered his acquisition costs, and that means the trade value might not be as good, due to the fact that a savvy front office may believe it can buy low on a former top 7 pick without surrendering a treasure trove of draft capital or assets. And any deal will hinge on the Warriors' demand for immediate rotation upgrade and acquiring the team's appetite for a role player who can fit their rotation. We've all thought the Golden State Warriors and Brooklyn Nets would have done a sign and trade, as he kind of fits the rebuilding timeline. They have Haywood Highsmith, who maybe could be someone that fits the timeline, or he's also an expiring contract for the Warriors, while also Terrence Mann is another option that you could look at, or a combination of Haywood Highsmith and Daron Sharp, who would be a rebounding big man who could be an interior presence for them. Now, another young team is the Washington Wizards. He fits their timeline, and they had recently traded Kuzma, and this is a team that it becomes a little hard to see who the player they would have interest in. Maybe it's a Corey Kispert, but I think he actually has a better trade value than Kuminga, and that leads me to think, would it then be someone along the lines of a Marvin Bagley and Cam Whitmore? But like, that's really not that great. I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't go after that if I were the Warriors. And the Portland Trailblazers are one that I really like. Jeremy Grant and Robert Williams, both of the archetype of player that the Warriors need. Both two-way players and veterans, but one is a wing, and Matisse Thybulle, 3-and-D, one with an expiring contract, and Robert Williams being a defensive rebounding interior anchor, and Portland being overloaded with forwards and bigs, and obviously wanting to get younger around Denny Avdia and Tamani Kamara could be useful. Now, I think the Warriors are trading potential for production, but they need a player who helps Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green win today. The acquiring team is trading production for potential, hoping that Kuminga eventually becomes the star that Golden State once hoped he would be. Now, we talked about the Suns deal in the past. The Suns seemingly were offering Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal. I don't know if they would offer either of those players for Jonathan Kuminga, so I don't think the Suns are there. There was a rumor that, the Kings were there, and that deal was Dario Saric and Devin Carter. And if it wasn't those two, it was a obviously, I think it was Malik Monk is the third piece in there, or Malik Monk, and I think it was just a pick. So I don't think those deals are on the table anymore. We'll talk about the Pacers and Pelicans here from a video prior. So I guess I'm mistaken. Dalton Johnson says Kuminga's trade market will heat up in the coming weeks. The Kings and the Suns, his two biggest suitors, remain interested in him. So if that's going to be the case, I find that interesting. So real quickly, maybe it is Royce O'Neal who's thrown in this deal. I think Grayson Allen's too good to be traded. So Royce O'Neal and Nick Richards would then allow them, that would technically put them at 75. So they would have to include one more contract in there, or it would have to be Grayson Allen and Nick Richards, which then would make that deal work and give you, again, the similar thing, a 3-and-D guy and interior presence in Nick Richards and Grayson Allen. Now, the Kings, at this point, it's either Malik Monk, who I don't get why they weren't interested. It was the money. They said they wanted to have their books, evened up, and I don't think it'll be Schroeder. Maybe it would be, or maybe it's a DeMar DeRozan and Kuminga, but I think the better deal would be Malik Monk and Devin Carter, maybe throwing Dario Saric in there, but yeah, rest will be Pacers and Pelicans. Yo, what's going on, guys? And we're talking about a report coming from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points that the Pacers and the Pelicans are the two teams to look or to watch out for and keep an eye on for maybe a deal involving Jonathan Kuminga. And it seems like it's more the Warriors want to shop Kuminga to get their upgrade. I've said for the longest time, maybe it ends up just being the Kuminga Vucevic
swap that we thought for the longest time. That just helps out the Warriors, and Kuminga kind of fits what the Bulls are doing. But let's get right into it. The Warriors are trying to be a playoff team, trying to be a contender, and Kuminga has just this season for this squad, when he's played, there's been mixed results. He's averaged just under 14 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 3 assists. He's someone that, in my opinion, this year, if he has a team option, he's on an expiring contract. He's 23 years old. He's played 13 games. He's shooting 32% from three, 47% from the field. I understand if they're trying to shop him to maximize the window that they have right now. So with that being said, I'd like to hear your guys' opinions before we start doing some trades. What do you guys think Kuminga's value is, and what would you trade for him? I mentioned before, the deal that I've thought for the longest was this Bulls deal that we've all heard rumored for a while, and Vooch just seems like he would fit what the Warriors want, and Kuminga would just be a rental to test out how he'd look in a Bulls uniform. And I think the only thing, right here, this trade can't be done until January 15th, but salary wise, it all works. It just can't happen until January 15th. All the other trades, if they're recently signed, would be December 15th. Bird right guys would be January 15th. So we're going to go to the Pacers. Who could the Pacers have that end up, being someone of interest for the Warriors? They'd be sending out $22.5 million. I think it would be a contract that the Pacers would want to be getting out from under. And that's where this becomes interesting to see, due to me believing that I think they like a lot of their guys. And I think the guys that the Warriors would be interested in are the ones that they wouldn't want to trade. So that's where that becomes difficult, because Aaron Nesmith would be the one that I think that they would want to bring in. I think Aaron Nesmith is somebody that they would want to keep. So would this end up being like an Obi Toppin, who maybe does fit what they're trying to do? This deal would have to require the Pacers including another $1 million. So the minimum salary that they would have to send out is $15 million for this deal to work. And when I look at that, that's might be a bit more difficult or not as easy for them to achieve as the Pacers would want, because I think the Pacers are cool taking on a flyer. I just really wonder, and they probably want to take draft capital from the Warriors. You can just assume whatever draft capital that is in the comment section. For the Warriors, I think they would want a forward, and that's where it comes. Would this be an Obi Toppin, or would you see a world where this ends up being like Aaron Nesmith and Jarris Walker? And in this scenario, I think this is the deal that if I'm the Warriors, and if there's two players that I mean, Jarris Walker's just could be a consolidation prize right here. Yeah, Kuminga wouldn't be able to be traded till January 15th. But in this deal, if I'm the Warriors, I get Aaron Nesmith, who can put B-Pod on, and Buddy Hield more on the bench. And then we have a lineup of Steph Curry, sometimes Moses Moody, but it'd be Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Aaron Nesmith, Draymond Green, and then one of the centers at the center position that from, obviously Quinn Post, or it could really be a TJD, Trace Jackson Davis, or Al Horford. While the other lineup, Draymond Green, obviously at center, Jimmy Butler, Aaron Nesmith, Moses Moody, or B. Potter, Buddy Hield, and Steph Curry. It just gives you a lot of Gary Payton II. It just gives you a lot more versatility. And if I'm the Warriors, that's kind of sort of the deal that I'm looking at that really entices me, and put in the draft capital because I get a contract that I like in Aaron Nesmith. And then Jarris Walker could be someone that we develop and take a flyer on. Now, what if it is Obi Toppin that we end up making this deal built around? Who's the flyer that they would include in here? Would it be a Cam Jones? Cam Jones really hasn't played for this team, for the Pacers, in the way that I think they would have liked. The other one would have been Ben Shepherd, but I think they would keep Ben Shepherd. So in this scenario, you get Cam Jones, who played some shooting guard and college, but then played point guard once Tyler Kolek went to the NBA, who's able to play both. Again, this deal wouldn't be able to happen until January 15th, but it is able to happen because the Pacers would be $272,000 below allowable income amount, which I think in this scenario, you get Obi Toppin, who isn't as good as Aaron Nesmith, but you still are able to have that versatility of lineups where either Obi Toppin, Draymond Green at the front court, or Obi Toppin, Al Horford, Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, something like that, that you could have, a bigger size that would make this team a bit bigger, and I think that's something that there would be interest. Now, they we just I don't know why, but my camera was just saying like, oh, we're gonna connect to this, but no, no, no. So over here, if we go over to the Pelicans, what would this deal be around? How funny would it be for Jordan Poole? I'm kidding. Supposedly it would be for like a Trey Murphy or a Herb Jones, which in my mind would mean the Warriors would be giving up whatever draft capital possible. So the easiest one would be draft capital and Jonathan Kuminga, I assume, for a swap of Trey Murphy for Kuminga, but they would still have to put up $2.5 million in salary. Would you then throw in, to give up less draft capital, a B pod, and make this a B pod trade where, yeah, you could hypothetically do this deal because, and I'm just going to take off the bird right thing just so it stops saying failed because it's annoying me. While we all know this deal wouldn't be able to happen until January 15th, and you're like, all right, they would need like a minimum salary. They just gave up B pod. Who could be someone that they're interested in? Maybe we just throw in Micah Peavy, who's a really good defensive swing man who can guard 1 through, some 4s. And in this scenario, yeah, Trey Murphy, Micah Peavy, or Jonathan Kuminga, and Brandon and B pod. That I think that would actually be a deal that the Pelicans get off of the money, and they also get a young guy that they can take a look at B pod and extend, while Kuminga would fit next to Zion. Now, Trey Murphy is better than Herb Jones. So let's say they do this Herb Jones deal. Now, they would have to stack salary because I think outright this deal, the Pelicans, yeah, would be $8.5 million over the allowable income amount, which then you would think, what if Kevon Looney gets traded back there, which is actually feasibly possible that they could just throw in Kevon Looney and, as we mentioned earlier, either a Micah Peavy or a Karlo Matikovic, which I think Michael Peavy would be the guy here. Now they're sending 3 guys with a guy that I think that the Warriors could include or would include in this scenario. Man, it's very interesting. The other thing I would think is like maybe we find out that De'Anthony Milton's just not healthy and it's just not going to be someone who ends up playing impactful minutes for the Warriors, which obviously would suck because he's someone that they brought in and they were hoping he's going to be an impact, and he still hasn't played for them ever since getting hurt last year. They could do something like this, Kuminga and Milton, and then they get Herb Jones, Kevon Looney, and Micah Peavy. You could take off Micah Peavy if you want to believe that would allow the salary to be allowed. And yeah, one of the things I was going to bring up was that in this, obviously, drop capital, the Warriors have to give up significant amount because they would be poaching 2 players that have at least first round. I think 2 first round picks would go for Trey Murphy. Maybe you can get one of those first round picks taken off if you put B pod in there. The other thing is that like Kuminga, I don't think he's just a neutral value. Now, what would it be if they weren't going to just trade for any of those guys and it was just like right now Kevon Looney and Saddiq Bey for Jonathan Kuminga would be at 14.1 to $200,000 more than what the straight up deal for Herb Jones would have been. So you would have to obviously look for other salary to add to there. And that's where, do you think they would maybe think about a Jose Alvarado in this deal? I know we brought up that this would have to be something including, because right here 8.8, so 4.4 is what they would. Micah Peavy with Jose Alvarado theoretically could get this deal done, or just Jose Alvarado just thrown in by himself, and then you have the Warriors include who we mentioned earlier, De'Anthony Milton. Would allow, let me see, let me take off Milton. Would this deal be allowed just straight up if it's like this? Yes. This would be the deal straight up. Kuminga for Looney, Saddiq Bey, and Jose Alvarado. The Warriors would have to do something with like De'Anthony Milton and probably one other player to get this deal done, but that's kind of the idea of like that deal. So what do you guys think of this? What do you guys think would be the deal that you would do if you were the Warriors? Which players? I think the Pelicans have maybe, obviously, if you're going for Herb Jones or Trey Murphy, that's the ones that you want. Maybe the depth pieces of Looney, Saddiq Bey, and Jose Alvarado is better than just Obi Toppin if they're not going to give up Aaron Nesmith. That's it. Like, comment, and subscribe.